everyone, and welcome to our newest edition of Vegas Nation Mailbag, where we bring you up to date on all things happening with the Raiders, set to kick off in Las Vegas in 2020. I'm your host, Heidi Fang, and joined, as always, by our Review Journal sports columnist, Ed Graney, and also joining us today, our NFL writer, Greg Bedard. Greg, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thanks, Heidi. Ed, glad to be with you. Glad to be part of the team.
Ed, how you doing today?
I'm well, kid. How are you?
I'm awesome, man. I mean, we're going to get into everything that happened with Green Bay last Sunday. Ed, you and I were there.
We're there.
We had a great time.
We were there.
We were there. We got to see this awesome tour of the stadium, though. That's what I was getting at. I really enjoyed that part. Please check that out if you go to reviewjournal.com. We are also going to get into the Raiders heading into Houston. But first, we have to get into some news here, Ed. Unfortunately, we have to start off with sad news, the passing of Hall of Fame cornerback Willie Brown at the age of 78. I mean, this is a sad day, and yesterday was as well for the entire Raiders organization. I mean, Willie Brown, Ed, what can you say about him?
And it is sad, and it seems like the Raiders are losing a lot of these guys lately, and I know Mark Davis has been affected by it because they're going too fast, obviously, for anyone in the Raiders organization, but it's happening one after the other. I want Greg, obviously, with his football expertise, to talk about Willie Brown, the player, and what he meant. I know Willie Brown, the man, meant so much to the Davis family. You hear the stories of in recent years where he was there for Mrs. Davis, Mark's mom. Mm-hmm. He would meet her on the off the plane ride, walk her down, walk her to her car, take her to lunch, be there at her house, talking to her. So he really was close to the Davis family, as most of these Raiders are, but Willie held a special place in the Raiders' heart in terms of the Davis family and Mrs. Davis, and that was a hard one the other day. They're all hard for them, but I got a feeling talking to people that was a hard one. And great, let me ask you, because everyone says Willie Brown, the first bump and run guy. Who was Willie Brown as a corner?
Yeah, I mean, he's an unbelievable story. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was a defensive end and tight end in college, and then all of a sudden in the pros he went to cornerback, and that's how he came up with the bump and run coverage, because that's how he had to play. That's how he knew he had to play. And it was something that the NFL had never seen. It's something that continues to this day. It's become even more of an emphasis now, where you need to play man-to-man, press man, bump coverage to really affect these really good quarterbacks in the league now. And he was 6'2". He was tough. He had unbelievable ball skills for a guy his size. And there's no question that he's one of the greats. He was one of the innovators at the position, and the NFL is really going to miss him.
Let me ask you real quick on that, because people always say, if Jordan played in the NBA today, he'd score 80 points a game because everything was called. How would Willie Brown translate to 2019 with how the game is called defensively now?
It's a great question, because watching some of the clips, I was thinking about that, and I actually think he would have been more of a sort of like maybe a coverage linebacker type of guy. I mean, he would have had to, slim down a little bit to play on the corner, but he still could have. I mean, we still have, large corners in this league. The speed is definitely different on the outside. I'm not sure he could quite match up that way, but he definitely would have had a place somewhere covering somebody, and he would have been I could tell you, would have been a nightmare matchup for tight ends in this league, and I think that's where he really would have made his bones if he was in today's game.
Well, we are going to read a statement here from Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, who said, "It's a very sad day for the Raider Nation as a whole, and for my family in particular. Willie Brown was one of the greatest to ever play the game, but it was off the field and how he treated my mom, for which I will forever be indebted to him. Every road trip, it was Willie who helped my mom up and down the stairs off the plane. It was Willie who joined her for all dinners on the road. It was Willie who came to her every birthday and Mother's Day dinner. It was Willie who was her best friend. We loved and will miss you, Willie." Mark Davis. So again, we hope the Raiders can move on past this. We do have them to go out to Houston to play, and the Raiders on Monday traded starting cornerback Conley. Yeah. So this is kind of big news for the team in terms of trying to finish out this road trip here with the win. It started out in Minnesota. Now the final part of this road trip taking place in Houston, and Conley no longer a part of this team, but playing for the opponent who they're facing.
That's weird. And again, I'm going to let Greg talk football because he watched the game and broke it down for us in the paper. I just always got the feeling, talking to people around the organization, he wasn't a fit for Gruden and Mayock personality-wise. I mean, seemed, they brought him in on a risk off the field because of the rape allegations. No charges filed, but that he had him right away. Two games his first year because he was hurt. Last year, I think near the end, and none of them were very good. So when they said he was one of their better guys at the end of last year, I don't really know what that meant because none of them were good. But it just seemed. I'll give you a quote someone in the organization gave me. They said when he goes to the Texans locker room, Greg, he's going to be as known there by the Raiders as he would have been in their locker room. So that kind of tells you a lot about what his personality was, and I just don't think for what Gruden and Mayock want as a football player, he fit the bill.
Yeah, and as a former first-round pick, obviously it was under Reggie McKenzie, so those guys are always sort of, the new regime is sort of looking at them with one eye, sort of, what are you doing? As a first-round pick, you expect one of those guys that's sort of the straw that stirs the drink in the locker room, and he wasn't that, so that's another strike for him. And then it came to on the field. He really struggled in that Green Bay game. I mean, he just looked like he didn't want to tackle anybody, whiffed on a few, didn't get to the edge. Look, this is a team, that I think is going places. They might not be perfect right now, but, they have an identity on offense where it's their offensive line, it's the running game, it's tough, it's hard-nosed football, and they want to be the same way on defense, and that means the corners have to tackle.
Right.
And they got to come up, and he wouldn't do that. And, Trayvon Mullen is a guy who, in limited time, has shown the ability that he's going to do that. And so I think the Raiders saw that and were just like, that's not who we are. Time to move on, cut bait. Let's get back to who we are.
15, since John Gruden stepped into that press conference to be renamed the coach and come back to the organization, only 15 people on that roster then are there with them now.
It's
so
amazing.
There's some obvious ones like Derek Carr, but for the most part, they are making a statement here. And I'm not gonna. It's their team. They were hired to do the job. Build it how you want, and then in the end, you can either be successful or fail at it. But they are absolutely moving on from the McKenzie era and regime of they're getting the players that they think are football players and what they want them to look like.
And obviously, coming off of the Green Bay loss, they were there at Lambeau Field. 42-24. That's saying a lot. Aaron Rodgers tore through the secondary, and this is something I'm sure they're going to be looking at. Was it about the greatness of Rodgers, or was it about the defense? Like, what kind of statement do you think happened here with the Raiders and what they need to do as they head into Houston?
Well, there's a couple things that this team's lacking right now. Number one is pass rush up front. They are really struggling to get any sort of pass rush. And if you're not flustering a guy like Aaron Rodgers and he can sit back there, he's going to pick you apart, especially with the sort of coverage. Paul Gunther likes to play zone coverage. I think that's really tough to do in this league at this point in time if you don't have a pass rush especially. And then the other thing that what I noticed is that they almost sort of formationally and using motion, they tried to get guys on their linebackers, and they just picked them apart. And on Joseph too in the secondary, they tried to get the linebackers and Joseph to cover, and they got picked apart. And it might not affect them this week against Deshaun Watson, but it's going to be an issue against the better quarterbacks in this league.
Right, and on the other side of the ball, Ed, the Raiders actually outgained the Green Bay Packers. So, what do you think needs to happen here as far as execution?
Well, they did in yards, but I think the biggest number you can take from it is 0, and that's how many points they got out of 3 trips in the red zone. If you do that in the NFL, you're not winning games, especially in a shootout. You have no chance at that point. You have to keep up with that guy because you're not stopping him. You can't go into the red zone. He fumbled going in, meaning Carr. He did that against Dallas. He didn't learn his lesson there. Took the blame afterwards, but it doesn't mean anything at that point. You gave the ball back. Jacobs tries to do what we saw him do in London and go over the top. They were obviously ready for it. He didn't happen. And I guess I'll ask you this. On the third one, you're chasing so much, he's trying to make a play, he throws the picks. I didn't worry. That one, I'm like, okay, that happens. I thought the 2 horrible ones were you got to secure the ball in the NFL. You have to secure the ball. And then Jacobs, again, he had just done that against Chicago. They've schemed against it. He's going to do it. I had a problem kind of with those 2 stops more than the interception, because when you're chasing 18 or whatever it was, you're going to try to force something.
Yeah, the Jacobs play is going to happen, and you wish you would have gotten a little bit more push from the offensive line there and the fullback. But Carr, it's just inexcusable at his stage of his career to fumble at the goal line. Bill Belichick coaches his guys to where if they do it, they get put on the bench.
They're not allowed to do that,
They're not allowed to do it.
Reaching it out.
They're not allowed to. And if they do it, they better score because then they're going to the bench.
Right.
And so Carr's done it now twice. And then the interception, yes, he's trying to make a play, but there's sort of like a rule with quarterbacks is that when you throw to the goal line, a play near the goal line, you throw low. If it's to the end line, you throw high, only where your guy can. And he was in between. He did not get it high enough. that to me, that is still an inexcusable turnover there. At least you want to get points there.
Right, you
at
gotta
the
get three,
least.
I mean, something.
Yeah, it's something, and they just didn't, and that just can't happen. Especially in a game where you know Aaron Rodgers is not going to give up the ball.
You haven't stopped him all day. You can't go in there 3 times in the red zone and get 0. You have, I mean, what's going to happen is 42-24.
Yeah, exactly. So as the Raiders head into Houston, I'm sure that's in their head. They are 3-3 though. I mean, that's pretty surprising considering the road trip when it started. I don't think a lot of people expected them to be just 1 game back from the Kansas City Chiefs. So as this long road swing comes to a close here, and Kansas City being at 5-2, Raiders in 3-3, I mean, do you believe that this is important and how big it is for the Raiders right now to take home a win?
Well, I was talking to Greg before the show here. I'll raise my hand. I thought there was a good chance they'd go 0-5 on the trip. They were not favored in any of the games.
No.
They had not played. I mean, you just saw Mahomes go crazy. I'm so sorry. They didn't really give you the idea. It's like, yeah, we're going to go, beat the Bears and what they did against Indianapolis. But they did, so all credit to them. I think it's a combination of what Greg said. I think they do have an offensive identity now, and I think it doesn't hurt that the Chargers are nowhere near what people thought and that Mahomes is hurt. Now, again, he's back practicing, so you don't know how long this guy's going to be out. But I do think, and I'll ask Greg, I think there's a path to a wild card. And why is this week so important? Because I think Houston has a path to a wild card, and then you want to have the head-to-head.
Yeah. You really want, this is a big swing game. I mean, because they're basically going to be like 2.5 games out if they lose this game. And, in the head-to-head will matter if they're a 2-way tie.
Right.
Then you're hoping for a 3-way tie. But there's no doubt that this is a big game, for the Raiders. It doesn't kill them if they lose it. But it would certainly give them a leg up, and it would put them, if they do win this game, they're in the playoffs currently if the playoffs ended today. And if they lose, it's a much harder road.
Yeah, now we should also talk on the back end, starting with, and Detroit's played well at times, but at the Jets, at Denver, home to Jacksonville, the Chargers twice. I think before the season, Raider fans would have said, can they even get a split against the Chargers? Now I think you have to think in your mind, can you get them both? One's on a short week against Thursday, and who knows where the Chargers' mindset will be at the end of the year if they're out of it. So there's games now, I think, in the back end, like Greg said, I think it's huge if you get the win this week. You are in it if you get the win this week for a wild card at least.
And the Raiders, I think, you can see that the confidence is there right now with the team. Injuries, we're starting to see people come back from, like Tyrell Williams. It looks like Josh Jacobs is going to be a go. So
Trent Brown just practiced this week, I think.
Right. So I think as they head in here, they're still a little banged up from being on the road, but they're starting to get back to being healthy again enough at least to get somebody like Tyrell Williams back. That's going to be huge to be able to stretch the field.
And I think it's more like Greg said on the offense. I mean, look, they all, even when they lose 42-24, pro athletes always act more confident than they probably are. But I did get a sense of legitimate confidence even after the Green Bay win, because I do think they can move the ball on people. I mean, I don't know what they think defensively, but when you listen to Carr, it wasn't just the same, okay, this guy's, fully, I mean, he's just saying that because he feels he has to. I truly believe they think offensively they can move the ball on
They
people.
should. I mean, when I watch them on film, I'm duly impressed, especially by the offense. I mean, that offensive line is excellent when everybody is healthy. I mean, hopefully they have Hudson and Trent Brown and guys like that this week, because they have to worry about J.J. Watt and Whitney Merciless, who are two of the best pass rushers in the business.
Absolutely.
But, with the tight ends, Waller is no doubt one of the elite tight ends in the league right now. And then you have Jacobs, who is an elite running back. I mean, they might not have the splashy parts on the outside, but they don't need it. Not the way John Gruden's calling games right now, and that's something else that needs to be said. John Gruden had a great game plan last week. He called a bunch of great plays. He's feeling confident in what they're doing, and I think that's permeating to the rest of the team.
Did you? And I thought the Chicago game was one of the best games he called. The Foster, the throw on the back end that got to the winning drive, I thought was an incredible call. What have you thought in the past of what you've seen as John Gruden as a play caller?
Yeah, before I sort of started digging the Raiders film, I was, he's known as a West Coast guy, and you don't see any really tried and true West Coast guys stick around. Like Mike McCarthy was a guy like that. Andy Reid is a West Coast guy, but he's branched out and included a bunch of college sort of tricks of the trade,
especially with the quarterback.
Gruden hasn't done that, so I had my doubts about him. But with the multi-tight end offense. And the running game and this offensive line, he's really starting to feel himself, and he is providing matchup problems, and also He's scheming a lot. When you see these guys wide open in these games, it's not because they're beating their guy. It's because Gruden's really scheming up this stuff where he has a guy going deep and another guy underneath. It's really working right now. And so I think that's a big bonus for the Raiders right now.
Yeah, definitely. You talked about the tight ends like Foster Moreau. He's been also contributing in huge ways for this team. But somebody here, we have a question, maybe a comment, from a gentleman named Justice ESPN Las Vegas Head. It says, from a scale of 99 to 100, how likely is Gruden to trade for Nick Mullins? 49ers backup, guys.
99.6? I don't know. Somewhere in the middle.
What do you give this one?
I know Jared, and it was Thursday at the show, so I hope he isn't tipping a few back early. But I will say this. I will say this on because Jared brings up the idea of trading. Deadline's coming up. I saw a tweet from you earlier today. They do need pass rush up. They have a plethora, if you want to say that word, in tight ends. If you're them, can you give us a few they might be looking at in terms of if you want to move a tight end for a pass rusher?
Yeah, see, the problem with pass rushers, everybody wants one, but no one wants to give them up. But you do run into circumstances like right now in New England with Michael Bennett, who is tried and true proven between the Seahawks and the Eagles. He's still a really good player. Yes, he's a little long in the tooth, but trust me, because I've seen him in training camp, the preseason, the games when he's gotten in. He's effective. He's really good when he gets in the game as a pass rusher. The Patriots it's a circumstance where they've changed schemes. So they've gone from when they signed him when they were a 4-3 and had different plans. Now they're a 3-4. They're using multiple linebackers. So they don't need Michael Bennett. But I think I think he would be perfect for a team like the Raiders. He could take some of the younger kids under his wing. He's got another year left on his contract at a decent rate. The Raiders have cap room, and I doubt that they would give up one of their tight ends, even a guy like Carrier, because I think they have something good going. But, you could probably get him for a draft pick. And
they have those.
I think he would be perfect for the Raiders and really address a need for them as they're battling for a playoff spot. And they'll be there till the end. So you got to get those difference makers. And I think Bennett is a guy who can make big plays on passing downs and disrupt a guy like Aaron Rodgers.
So you'd be shocked if they're not buyers.
Yeah, I think they should be buyers. Absolutely.
Again, that trade deadline coming up October 29th. But there you have it. Hope you enjoyed another edition of the Raiders Mailbag. Watch for more of the Vegas Nation Mailbag shows this season. We'll be here for you each week. And remember to get all of your news right here at Vegas Nation on the Vegas Nation app as well, and reviewjournal.com. For Ed Graney, for Greg Bedard, I'm Heidi Fang. Thank you for watching.